Kuzambola. My name is Rabsel Dorji, and today I have the honor of talking to Mr. Rabsel Dorji, who is the Chief of Communications at the Gelephu Mindfulness City. This conversation is brought to you by Bhutan Global Mindfulness and MICE, which is a company from DHI PTE Limited and G9 Limited, Singapore. The conversation is titled Gelephu Mindfulness City, Vision, Voice and Action. Other than being the Chief of Communications at GMC, Rabsel is also a very dear friend. He is the Honorary Consul of France to Bhutan, and he is a dear mentor, not just to me, but entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs all over Thimphu. In fact, a lot of the times I will meet an entrepreneur and they'll talk about mentorship sessions that they're going to, and I'll ask, who's your mentor? And there's a 1.5 chance that the mentor is Rabsel, because Rabsel loves to support young entrepreneurs. Other than the issue of him supporting Arsenal Football Club, we do tend to get along on a lot of topics as well. Welcome, Kuzampo.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And do you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself? Because the introduction I just gave of you, Arsenal Football Club, Honorary Consul, Chief of Communications, that presents a very diverse background. So can we consolidate that?
Sure. Thank you, Bob. I want to also start off by thanking BGMM for the opportunity to present on the Gelephu Mindfulness City. I want to thank you. Thank you for calling me a dear friend. I consider you a dear friend as well. In many ways, I think I identify myself first and foremost as the son of a diplomat. And I say that because so much of my life has been molded by my father's job, which took us all over the world. My father was a career diplomat working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and so therefore I was born in Bangladesh in his first posting. Came back to Bhutan at a very young age, and then at the age of less than four, we were transferred to Geneva in Switzerland. Spent 6 years over there. Spoke only French. The first language that I learned in school was French, and in many ways I thought of myself as a little Swiss boy. Came back to Bhutan at the age of 10, had a huge culture shock in our own country. Everyone looked like me, I couldn't speak the language, had to pick up English and Dzongkha. But spent very important 4 years, formative years in Zampa. And then from there, again, my father was transferred to the US in New York, and I did my high school over there. I made a very unconventional decision then to, instead of staying in the US for college, to come back closer home. I wanted to understand India a bit more. I wanted to understand our neighborhood a bit more. By then I was quite clear that I wanted to, in the long term, live and work in and for Bhutan. And so I decided to do my college in India. So I was in Delhi for another 3 to 4 years. And then, of course, like any good Bhutanese son, my parents wanted me to be in the foreign ministry, in the government as well. And so I agreed. I studied quite a lot, but I had a very kind of life-changing experience. I volunteered as an English teacher at Yangchenfu. And I did that because I wanted to get out of my comfort zone, and I wanted to learn how to, speak in front of a crowd. I was a very shy, very introverted person. I spent almost half a year, a bit more than half a year, a whole semester teaching at YHS. And completely changed my perception of what service would look like. I was quite inspired by many of the teachers over there. There's a lady called Madam Josna, for example, who's still teaching at YHS.
She's my teacher.
She's a teacher as well. And so inspired by people like that. And I had amazing students. And I realized that I could actually have real impact by being on the ground, bottom up. And that convinced me that I didn't need to join the government necessarily. And so, quite coincidentally, my father again got transferred back to Geneva, to Switzerland. So I used that as an opportunity to convince my parents that I wanted to do an MBA. And that again was molded from a mentor that I had, a Japanese lady called Mieko. And I decided to wanting to be a social entrepreneur. And I wanted to do that because I believe that social entrepreneurship was a perfect complement to gross national happiness, which historically has been a very top-down, government-led, policy-based approach. And I thought social entrepreneurship would kind of form this complementary role from bottom up in private sector and civil society-led. So I went to do my MBA in Geneva. And I got quite fortunate there also, and I got a job in the UN system, international development. But soon enough, within a couple of years, I realized that I wanted to come back to Bhutan because my life was, in a way, shaped by all the privileges and opportunities that I received because of my father, him being a civil servant, afforded by the state, by the government and the country of Bhutan. And I knew that all these opportunities, I had to pass it on, I had to pay it forward. So 2-3 years into my job in the UN, I quit my job against the advice of many people. And I came back to Bhutan. And back here, then I wanted to be a social entrepreneur. So for the next 10 years, that's what I did. I started many businesses. Many of them did well, many of them did really badly, failed horribly in fact. Those were very good for me because it built a certain level of mental fortitude, resilience, understanding different skill sets. And I just did many things. And about 3 years ago, I had again the honor of being able to have these audiences with His Majesty. And at that time, His Majesty was just starting to talk about this new city and how it's going to be a catalyst for larger transformation for Bhutan. And I was completely taken by it. I was completely inspired by the leader, the vision, and what it would mean for our country. And I realized that that was my calling, that I had come back to Bhutan for that all these experiences I had culminated in that. And so when the honor and the opportunity to join GMC came about 2.5-3 years ago, it was the easiest decision of my life, as I always say. I dropped everything. I closed down everything. The biggest risk I took was I didn't tell my wife first. So I told my wife, and
I don't know if you've told her now, but I
just so she knows.
Yeah.
But I'm extremely fortunate because I have such a supporting wife and family, and the last 2.5 years has been an incredible journey for me personally as well, working for the GMC.
Thank you. I think a lot of people who listen to your story, something that I want to add is, other than just being a social entrepreneur working at the UN, he was also a lecturer at RTC. He was a teacher at YHS, and something he's left out a little bit now was he also wanted to be a football coach. So there's a diversity of experiences there, and of course, when the vision of GMC, when the work on that began, you were in on the team from the start. You've already spoken about how these experiences were all built towards your role there. But can you tell us about, your current role, which is Chief of Communications? And I know that before you were the Chief of Communications, you distinctly wanted to be called a team member at GMC. And so can you tell us a little bit about that? What sort of jobs or what sort of tasks have you done for GMC over the last 2.5 years?
It's a great question because I think it speaks to the culture and the mindset, the attitude that we are shaping at the GMC. The idea that we are not really defined only by the position or the title that we have to do everything. And really at the core of it is this startup mentality, this entrepreneurship culture. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a businessman, just being entrepreneurial. It just means that you have to think outside of the box. You have to be problem solving, critical thinking, intelligent risk taking. And that is the approach that we have at the GMC. And so, like you said, before becoming the Chief of Comms, quite recently actually, I was just team member. And that meant doing everything across all the verticals of the GMC, because we wanted to have a small, efficient team, but one that would be able to work in all these areas. And I think the background I had as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, really helped. And I talked about the resilience and the mental fortitude. And as most entrepreneurs know, you need to have multiple hats that you're wearing all the time. You're an entrepreneur as well. And so that came in quite handy working for the GMC. But that's something that we constantly want to embed in the mindset and the approach of the GMC, working like a startup and being agile and failing, but failing forward and failing fast. We're going to make mistakes, but being humble enough to know and acknowledge that you made a mistake, and then being able to iterate and pivot when required, and being able to make decisions quickly. And so that's the genius of the structure of the GMC, being a SAR, being a special administrative region, and relatively being a smaller scale right now, that allows us to be much more agile and much more proactive in our approach to development.
Thank you. Something that, every time I talk to you, something I always take away from any conversation I have with you is the depth, the uniqueness that you bring to the vision, of course. All of us in Bhutan and internationally as well, I think all of us are aware of GMC, the vision of His Majesty, the city, the gift that His Majesty is giving to us. But every time I talk to you, I walk away with a new insight, right? And something that you said right now just reminded me something you said about failing forward, right? You told me about the time His Majesty said about Zachichan Zanichung, right? Which is a Bhutanese proverb which says, you break one pot, another one appears. And so every time I talk to you, there's some new insight that I get. And so I wanted to ask you, as of right now, right, can you tell us about your current understanding or your zeitgeist, I guess, your right now understanding of the vision? What is it?
Well, that's kind of you to say, and it's a lot of pressure to come up with some new insight. But I've been now part of the GMC officially for over 2 years, as I said. And something that struck me recently is also about how I view myself, how I think GMC has been catalytic to how Bhutan also identifies itself. And I've been making so many GMC presentations to so many different types of stakeholders. And more recently, I realized actually, the more I kind of introspected and thought about it, the master stroke of His Majesty in even the identification of GMC and Bhutan in the larger regional and global map. And what I mean by that is, for those of us who are older, from the older generation, and perhaps even in the current generation, growing up, when we used to talk about Bhutan on the map, the words we used to use were landlocked, a small country, 700,000. Tiny Himalayan country, sandwiched between two giant neighbors. And subconsciously, I think that created a little bit of vulnerability, a smallness, an identity of just survival. And that was true, and that was required for a very pragmatic approach to development. But like I said, the master stroke for me of the GMC, that's something that is already happening, is that His Majesty didn't just think north and south. Let's look east and west. Let's zoom out in the map. And as you zoom out in the map, suddenly GMC and Bhutan is not about vulnerability anymore. It's actually about opportunity. It's opportunities, man. Because we are now actually strategically located perfectly at the center of this land economic corridor that connects the Middle East and South Asia and Southeast Asia, that caters to half of the world's population. It's a huge catchment area. And if we play it right, if we play our cards right, we can benefit from what we foresee will be the rise and the growth of South Asia. And Bhutan is just so strategically located. And so for me, that perspective shift, this paradigm shift, is already such a powerful impact that it has in terms of just how we identify ourselves. And I think that's already something, it took me maybe a year and a half to really think through, and I've been making this presentation. But when I really thought through it, I thought that's already major. That's already a major software of the GMC, is this kind of slight shift in perspective, which makes all the difference.
100%. I think, in our culture, a traditional song says, Zamling Saitewa Dojiden, right? Which means the center of the world is Dojiden. But, the perspective shift now is Zamling Saitewa could be GMC, right? And so we've talked about the vision, right? Now, when we talk about, because you said it yourself, if we play our cards right, that's about action,
yes.
right? So can you tell us a little bit more about what does it mean to play our cards right?
Yes. Well, like you said, and like we all know, the vision is extremely clear. It's extremely powerful, very inspirational. And it's not just me, it's everyone in the GMC team, Bhutanese or foreigners. It's, I think, everyone in the country. It's actually resonated so much beyond just our country, into the region, into the world. I can tell you personally from all these people that I've met over the last couple of years that the vision resonates, extremely powerful. And it resonates even more because it comes from a founder, a visionary in His Majesty the King, who is able to not just see but also act on it. And so where we are now is not on the why, which is the vision, but on the how, which is how we implement it. And we believe that we have a lot of things going on for us. One, if you look at the structure of a special administrative region, What that means is that it gives us some level of autonomy in the judicial, executive, and legislative systems. And that allows us to shape new regulatory frameworks, the laws that we have, the incentives, the tax systems, all of that can be coming through design, by design. And that is already something that is very unique. That is one of our unique selling propositions, so to speak. Yes, there are other SARs, but ours is by design for our own interest, strategically designed. So that's already there. Two, I think, is about timing. So the first one I would say is about tactic, and two is about timing. And if you look at timing, as I said, we think that South Asia is already in the momentum, really driven by India, of course, but South Asia is about to see huge economic growth. And we're right there, and therefore timing is perfect for us. But I think most importantly, besides tactics and timing, is team. And team is where leadership comes in. And I think most people, almost all people that I speak to, are actually inspired because of the leadership that we have in His Majesty the King, and then through His Majesty the King, the board of directors that we brought in, the CEO that we brought in, the governor that we've appointed, all the recruitments that we have so far. I think if I was to speak as an investor, for example, in the private sector, when you invest, you're not always investing in the business model. You're actually looking at the founder and the team. Mm-hmm. And most of the time you're assessing the founder and thinking, can that person solve all the problems that will come? Those that we know of and those that might be of the future. And I think what we have going for us is an extremely strong leadership, an extremely strong team. And so when you combine all those different factors, we have all those opportunities to succeed. And so what's missing now is just putting in the work. And that's something that for me, day before yesterday, I had the privilege of being in Gelephu and witnessing the start of the construction for the international airport. And I was listening to His Majesty Sunshe, the royal address. And there's one line particularly that really hit me, which is, it's time to work now. And I think that's so symbolic of what we are doing. We've put in a lot of work.
In terms of planning and preparation, and strategies, etc. And we continue to do that. But that work has to be put in by all of us. And by all of us, I don't just mean GMCT. This is a national vision. This is nation-building exercise. And I think it would be dangerous in a way, but I think it would be faulty to think that GMC will solve all of Bhutan's problems. That means that Bhutan has to also be involved. That's why communications is critical.
That's why we need to have this strong feedback loop between Bhutan and GMC's team to make sure that we are in alignment of how we develop and how that will impact Bhutan's larger reforms and transformation and development. And so it is time to work now. It's time to put in quite physically the work in terms of the airport gate infrastructure, but I mean much more in terms of changing our mindset, our culture, our approach to development. I think those are critical now.
Now, we'll come back to the work that's being done on the ground. Yes. In terms of the airport and everything. We'll come back to it in a second. But something I want to talk about right now is, you just said, it's not just the GMC team that will have to do this, Bhutan will also need to learn. And, because I had the fortune of being your friend, so I knew about the special city that was coming up a little earlier than most Bhutanese. And my question in my head was, okay, how is this going to happen, right? How is Bhutan going to learn from GMC? How are we making sure that the pro-business rules that GMC eventually comes up with, those are imbibed, or those find their way into Bhutan, either by osmosis or by legislation, right? And then His Majesty, of course, has already spoken to us about the diamond structure. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about diamond structure? And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and then say, I'm a Thimphu boy at heart, and being a Thimphu boy, this is my home, right? Yes. So can you tell me what I, as a Thimphu boy, what my role has to be in terms of helping bring GMC's innovations into Thimphu, into Bhutan?
Yes, thank you, Pope. I'll speak to you as a Thimphu boy, but I think it's also relevant, I think, for the Pinakhaboy and the Kwarop and the Kumtap and our Bhutanese brothers and sisters abroad as well. And so this is actually something that is relevant for all Bhutanese in Bhutan and abroad. Government, public sector or private sector or corporate, young and old. How we will use the GMC as a catalytic force is, as you mentioned, the diamond strategy. And this is, of course, a strategy that His Majesty has articulated last year during the royal address on the National Day. And the diamond strategy is really a framework that will guide how Bhutan will see its development. And what we mean by that is, the reason why it's a diamond strategy is because it's shaped like a diamond. And that's because we are looking at 20 years initially of divergence. And divergence means that Bhutan and GMC will chart its own course in a way. And what does that mean? That means in terms of the systems, the structures, the policies, also in terms of the rate of development, GMC and Bhutan will be slightly divergent. And then after 20 years, we're looking at that convergence, right? So as you have the divergence at the convergence, that's where you get the diamond shape. But it's not so simplistic as that. Underpinning that diamond strategy is that feedback loop that I spoke about. And that is where communication has to happen constantly between GMC and Bhutan. What does that mean again? That means that GMC will serve as a testbed, as a model, as a lab. We say sandbox sometimes, but it's a place for initiatives. It's a place for experimentation. GMC is where we will try out new things. GMC is where we can try what Bhutan can become. And we'll try many things in terms of governance structures, in terms of policies, systems. It'll be highly investor focused, business focused. And the lessons that we learn from the GMC, from its successes and certain failures, should then inform how Bhutan can reform itself. Now, why do we have to do two structures? Is because the GMC can be quick in its decision. I talked about failing fast, failing forward. And as we do that, we will then allow Bhutan to learn from it, and then Bhutan to modernize while safeguarding its values and traditions. That's why it's a mindfulness city. And that's why we don't want to do those radical transformation that might be required at a country level. The GMC can testbed that, and that can inform Bhutan. I like to think of it, if you were to look at a metaphor, as an arrow actually. GMC is that sharp arrowhead that's very clear, that shares the direction. And Bhutan is that shaft that provides the balance and that weight. And so where GMC heads and points towards is where Bhutan can point toward, but Bhutan has to be there as well. And so that relationship is extremely critical. And so all stakeholders in Bhutan, let's say the Thimphu boy who's here, whether you're an entrepreneur, a student, or in government or private sector, wherever it may be, we should have conversations constantly. And this is why I really appreciate platforms like this, because we must have these conversations. And GMC must be able to share with you what's happening. And you guys can give us your feedback. And you guys will maybe see what is working and what's not working. So we're not working in silos. And it's not just GMC team is doing their own thing and Bhutan will do its own thing. But GMC is not a silver bullet that will solve all of the existing problems in Bhutan. We must work together. And so this is why we say it's a nation building exercise. It requires everybody. And it's not like the GMC team also knows everything. We will have to learn from everybody. I've been very fortunate in this role of being able to talk to so many Bhutanese experts in their own field and just being like a sponge and learning and learning and learning, and then seeing how can we apply what is working in Bhutan in GMC, and then perhaps what we can do in GMC that can also be applied to Bhutan. So there's that very strong feedback loop, that communication that has to happen, so that collectively Bhutan can see its reform. But I think one thing to mention also is in the royal address, His Majesty actually outlined 4 key areas of reform. He talked about reform in education, reform in the legal systems and judicial systems, reform in the democratic institutions and democracy, and then of course in the electoral process, and then fourth of course in the, I don't want to say bureaucracy, in the civil service. He called it the entrepreneurial, the enlightened entrepreneurial bureaucracy. And so those are the 4 key kind of areas for reform that Bhutan must have as well. These are all very critical because GMC will unlock the opportunities for the future, but Bhutan must be ready to take advantage of those opportunities.
I think on that point, I think everyone watching right now, everyone who has followed the GMC story for the past 2.5 years, especially Bhutanese, non-resident Bhutanese as well, I think the question that everyone is asking is how, right? How do I become involved in GMC, right? As a student, for example, right? Let's say I'm a student who's about to go off to college, right? How do I pick a major that's going to help me contribute to GMC or help me benefit from GMC, right? How can I apply to work for GMC? Could you tell us about various ways to engage with GMC to become part of GMC?
Well, I think inherently everybody is already a part of GMC. As a Bhutanese, GMC is for Bhutan, so you're already inherently part of it. And of course, at a more functional level, we know we have these 7 economic clusters, 7+1, and I think everybody knows what these 7 economic clusters are. We can go into it if you want, but there's 7+1, which is tourism as well. And so you can already identify these key economic clusters that will help be these economic engines, drivers for GMC, and of course you can position for that. The reality is that in 10 years and 15 years, who knows what new disruptions might come up, and so we'll have to be adaptable to that. So I think skill sets that are required will always be evolving, of course. But how can you be part of it? I think there's many ways. One, of course, working for the GMC. We had the recruitment drive recently, and we can talk about that if you want. Thousands and thousands of Bhutanese who applied both from in-country and outside. On a daily basis, I get calls and inquiries. Just today and yesterday and day before, I got 2 or 3 calls each from tour operators, from businessmen, from government, people who want to connect their friends, their network to GMC. And every time I get those calls, I feel so encouraged. I feel so happy because it shows that everybody actually wants to support. And they're doing that. They're saying, I have a friend who's interested in, could be hearing about GMC. They might be interested in investing. They want to work over there. Can you please meet them? We never say no. We always pick up the calls, answer the emails, meet them actually in person if we can, and we'll spend time presenting GMC to them. So that's another way. It's just connecting, and you can find many ways to do that. You want to invest in GMC? Absolutely. It's for Bhutanese. GMC is for Bhutan. And so I've also been talking to so many different business communities who have different levels of investments, of course. But based on their capacity and interest and sectors, we have those conversations, and the GMC team has different verticals that can answer specific questions. So my job in comms is not to answer everything. I don't have the deep dive understanding on all the verticals, but we have an open door policy, which means that any person that you talk to in GMC should not be able to say, please talk to someone else. In fact, all of us should be able to get that initial conversation, and then internally we should be able to bridge them to the right person. And so my daily life looks like sometimes like a juggler, because I'm juggling 50 different things that's happening in GMC. Some days I'm a firefighter putting out small and big flames, but most days I'm a bridge builder, as you said, trying to make sure that everybody, both internally at GMC, but also outside Bhutanese and non-Bhutanese who are interested in hearing, contributing, learning about the GMC, get to do so. That's very critical. We have to be open in that connection and in that conversation.
Thank you. We'll get back to, because we'll get back to the conversation and recruitment and opportunities in the different sectors. But I want to ask you right now about the investments, because we just had the nation building bond, and it was vastly successful. Can you tell us about, the different Bhutanese who are involved in that, what that money will be used for, and how that contributes to building GMC long term?
Thank you. I hope you don't mind me. So, just to give some context of how we even got to the nation building bond, which was an offering for the domestic audience, is when we went to Australia last year, and His Majesty went on his maiden visit to Australia to meet the Bhutanese over there, the response was incredible. It was very emotional actually for us, those who were able to see all the Bhutanese there, so proud, so happy to see His Majesty and proud of being Bhutanese and hearing about the GMC, and overwhelming resounding kind of feedback from them. How can we contribute? Same question. Every Bhutanese that we met. In fact, how can we donate to GMC? It could be big amounts, it could be small amounts. How can every single of us give a small amount of donation? It's not about the amount, it's not about the money also. It's actually that act of that service, that act of contributing. And we were so touched. And His Majesty was so touched that he said, instead of donations, let's also allow them to invest. Right? Let's also give them a financial instrument to invest. And that's how the FTD, Oro Bank, the FTD started. And so that was actually how it even kick-started. But then as we did that, and that itself was also wildly successful in terms of millions of dollars, then we had the Bhutanese here saying, we also want to be part of this. How can we be contributing as well? How can we be part of the GMC and the bond especially? So sure enough, our response was, of course, we have to also provide that opportunity. Now, it took us a bit of time, but we had to work out all the technical details. And we were looking at about 2 billion in terms of the locals were saying, how can we support the domestic audience? And we were looking at about 2 billion as a target. We got 3.3 almost, 3.5 billion oversubscribed. And that I think shows, again, it's not about the money for me. It's not about the amount. I mean, sure, it's amazing amounts. But the amount of Bhutanese who came, who said, we must contribute, even if it is the minimum, even if it is just 10,000, we must be part of this. This is His Majesty's vision for us. I think that is, for me, why I believe the GMC will succeed, is because every single Bhutanese, all the stakeholders that we have, wants to be part of it. And so the nation building bond was an incredible success. And we're very, very fortunate to see, I think, people really putting the money where the mouth is. I think Bhutan rose to the challenge, and it was such a heartening experience for us to witness that. Very, very grateful for Bhutanese in Bhutan as well as Bhutanese outside.
Thank you. So now let's take a step back a little bit, and then maybe also yourself. I'll request that for a minute you go back to being the social entrepreneur, Rabsel, that I first met, and then entrepreneur to entrepreneur. Let's think about in terms of not just contributing, but also benefiting from GMC. So basically what I'm asking is, can you, maybe give us a quick run through of the 7 sectors, plus one, but also maybe focus on one and then say, okay, if I was an entrepreneur right now, I would position my business towards one of these sectors like this.
Yes, that's a great question.
Identifying opportunities.
It's a tough question. BGMMG, you found a tough host. By the way, I still see myself as a social entrepreneur. In fact, I see the GMC as a social enterprise. And I see His Majesty as the greatest social entrepreneur that I've ever seen, to be very honest. So for me, I don't think I have taken that cap away. I still think that on a day-to-day basis, the work that we do at GMC has many elements of what a social entrepreneur would be doing. A very entrepreneurial approach, very much impact focused, and very much social impact focused. Just to go through these economic clusters, the first one is spiritual. And of course we know that GMC is going to be a Buddhist spiritual hub. We all
Vajrayana capital.
I don't know about calling it the Vajrayana capital, but it's going to be a Buddhist capital. It's a mindfulness city at the end of the day, and it has to be rooted in Vajrayana Buddhist values and in our Bhutanese values of Vajrayana, of mindfulness, of gross national happiness, Bhutanese core identity and ethos. So the GMC will be this hub for spiritual and Buddhist as a center. The next one is around health and wellness. Lots of opportunities in there. Bhutan is a country of medicinal herbs, land of medicinal herbs. Homenjong, exactly. And there's so much ancient wisdom there, traditional Bhutanese wisdom and medicine. And we think we can leverage those, the heritage that we have. And so how can we be a place for longevity, a blue zone, as we say, for long life? How can we bring in R&D around that area?
Integrative medicine.
Integrative medicine. So merging Western, modern and ancient Bhutanese traditions in medicine. Education and thought leadership. How can we be a hub again for thought leadership and education? This is a very safe place to send your children if you were to build a school over there, right? And think about our region, South Asia, a region that historically and kind of in many ways is characterized by upheavals and a little bit of distrust, lack of trust and instability. In that region stands GMC and Bhutan, and a brand that Bhutan has as a place that is very clean and green and safe and happy, of course. Let's take advantage of that. And so all these different economic clusters, how can GMC and Bhutan continue to leverage that brand that we have and the reality that is there as well? So education is going to be very critical. And then from there we go into energy, agri-tech and forestry, for example. There we again leverage on what Bhutan is known for, carbon negative, smart agriculture. Then we have, as I was saying, energy or basically
green energy,
green energy and digital, but really driven by this demand for AI and compute power. And given that ours is renewable energy, ours is going to be powered by hydropower and solar and all kind of clean energy. How can we leverage where we see also in the world right now a huge demand for that type of renewable energy? So how can we take advantage of that? Next you have finance and this digital banking. Like I said, we believe that there's huge opportunities economically, and how can we be a space for wealth management, for family offices, for digital banking, for startups, and how can we create that ecosystem there? The seventh one is airport and logistics. And now we started the construction of the international airport. We want to be a regional hub for connectivity, not just to Bhutan, but to the whole region. And this will help the Northeast India region. This will help the larger South Asia region in terms of connectivity and logistics, and that will create its own airport economy. And the final one, with the example that I'll give you, is tourism. And tourism cuts across all of them. So if you're a social entrepreneur in any particular sector, the idea is to almost reverse engineer from those 7 economic or those 8 economic clusters and think where can you position yourself, not just to have a market in GMC itself. And GMC will be, of course, a curated kind of a high-end market, but how can you leverage what GMC will provide in terms of connecting to the region, to larger South Asia? And how can you be an enabler also to businesses who might want to partner with a local, for example, to onshore or nearshore to the larger region? That's huge economic opportunities. So don't just think only of, let me set up my business in Bhutan in GMC, but also think about how can I be positioned as a Bhutanese who understands the local know-how? How can I be used as maybe to also enter the larger market? Because all these businesses from outside, these FTIs who come in, will be looking for partners where they can then enter India as well. So many opportunities that I think
any entrepreneur has here.
Unlock. And of course, underpinning that again is this regulatory framework at GMC that will be extremely investor friendly. We talk about ease of doing business, we talk about investor focus, and we talk about FDI policies that are quite rigid. Having been an entrepreneur for 10 years, I know the bottlenecks, I know what that landscape looks like. And I know, having talked to many entrepreneurs such as yourself, we know the difficulties that we face. It's not a lack of grit, it's not a lack of quality, it's not a lack of competency from the Bhutanese entrepreneur side. Many times it's actually just certification process, keys, regulatory problems, too much bureaucracy, red tapeism, etc. GMC has to make sure that we don't have that. It has to be efficient, has to be that. And if we have that, then it's not enough to just have it in GMC. The success of GMC must translate into success of Bhutan. Bhutan must also have that. And Bhutan's success ideally can translate into a larger region. So that is also very critical, that the regulatory frameworks are also in order to be enablers, so that the GMC can be an enabler for these things, not an implementer only. We want young entrepreneurs and startups to have roots there. And I don't think it can be only for Bhutanese as well. Let's invite the world, let's invite the region. Let's make GMC a hub for social entrepreneurship, a hub for startups. Let's build that, because we have the brand, we have the reputation. We have the trust.
And you, as you say, we have the ability.
Bhutanese, we have the ability. I've noticed this, especially more in the last couple of years with GMC, as I go and I talk to so many different young Bhutanese. The competency is there. The quality, the drive, the motivation is there. We just need a bit of experience. That's all we need. And that is also why, quite wisely, His Majesty wants to bring in international experts to the GMC, so that we have that potential, but we capitalize on that we have that learning curve. And that's been the case for me as well. In the last 2.5 years, it's been, I go home every day with about 20 tabs on my phone, because in the course of the day, as I talk to people, there's new concepts that I'm learning all the time. And that comes from Bhutanese, and it also comes from foreigners. And there's a constant kind of element of always being lifelong learners. And I'll give you one story about His Majesty that is that inspires me quite a lot. This was about less than a year ago, and we were in our audience with His Majesty. And at some point, His Majesty looked at his watch, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go. It's 6 o'clock." Of course, we didn't say anything. And His Majesty said, "Oh, I have to go home because I have to take a Coursera exam." And Coursera is this online educational platform. And His Majesty had to take 2 exams, one in banking and one in finance. So think about your king, our king, who is still studying deep dive details, taking exams, and saying that I have to go home to take an exam. I think that reflects the personality of the person, of course. But it reflects, I think, what we are trying to aspire to be at the GMC. For me, I take that personal inspiration of this idea of constantly being lifelong learners, and starts all the way from the top. And I think that is such a powerful example of what we should all aspire to be in Bhutan.
Thank you. I think one question that I'm sure every audience member has on their mind right now, that maybe it's not polite of me to ask also, but it's, do you feel pressure? Because, of course, working with His Majesty, right, getting to experience moments like that where you are deeply inspired, but I'm sure there might be some pressure also. Do you feel?
Yes, of course. Pressure makes diamonds, as they say, and maybe the diamond strategy came from there. But I think it's good to feel pressure. I think it's good to have a little bit of pressure that forces you to have this work ethic, a certain discipline.
The fear of failure.
The fear of failure. We've always had pressure. As an entrepreneur, we're facing pressure on a daily basis. And that kind of brings out, in many ways, the best of you, actually, because you have to put in that, you just have to put in that work many times. And there is going to be pressure, no doubt about this. This is high stakes. This is an extremely ambitious vision, and it should be. I don't think I would have joined GMC if I didn't think that this was, with the scale of ambition that it is. We're talking about transforming the future potential of our country. And so there must be pressure. If I came to you and I said, no, I don't feel any pressure, there's something either wrong with me, or the work that we're doing is not good enough. And so there has to be pressure. And what we do with that pressure is more important. How do we react to that pressure? Do we just buckle under that pressure and decide that we can't handle it? Then maybe you shouldn't be working for this vision and for this office. I think the answer is how you react to that pressure. I think that's when we start seeing those who have to contribute and those who have value for the vision.
Thank you. Something that I promised we'll get back to is the recruitment drive. A lot of Bhutanese, as you said, I think as soon as the call went out, a lot of Bhutanese, a lot of my friends applied. So could you give us an update on what's happening with that? Have you recruited people? Are we still in the process?
I know that my HR chief was very, very busy, still is very, very busy because of that. And in a way, it's a very good sense of busy because we received thousands and thousands and thousands of applications. And again, that reflects how it resonates. It shows how people are interested in being part of the GMC inside out, right, from working in the team itself. And the first few kind of batches of GMC team members also are people who gave up many things. And I wouldn't say gave up because they actually you would think financially, perhaps it was not the most. Many of them gave big financial offers they turned down to join the GMC without really knowing what particular role, compensation, positions that they might take, myself included, for example, but knowing that they were driven by this inspirational kind of leadership, but also vision, just wanting to be part of it in the long run. And so the recruitment drive that was started in May, I think reflected that. And what we saw was a lot of Bhutanese, not just in Bhutan, but from outside actually, who applied. And where we are right now is still in the process. There are some particular sections of the GMC, departments in the GMC, who've already conducted their interviews, and some that I think have started hiring. If you look at mine, for example, in communications department, we've done some shortlist, we haven't done some of the interviews. So we're still in the process. It's an ongoing process. But we have, for example, in the governor's office, there's someone called Ishe Choki. She left her job in Australia. She was working for Deloitte. And she came back to join the governor's office as a director. We have people like her. There's someone like Hazin in my team, in the GMC team, who had opportunities to join the UN in Bangkok. Turned it down to come to GMC. That story is a common thread, man. Not just with Bhutanese, with all the foreigners that we work with. Is sometimes when the vision is so powerful, when the leadership is so strong, people will come. And where we are, again, in the recruitment is an ongoing process. And we'll continue to do that. GMC will scale, will grow, will have to grow anyway. This is just the first round. So what I would say is to the thousands and thousands who have applied, keep applying. Keep wanting to be part of the GMC. We want people who have commitment. When I recruit, I'm not looking at just technical competency. Of course, there has to be a baseline. But I'm looking at who really wants to be part. Are they willing? You talked about pressure. Who wants to be part of that pressure? Mm-hmm. Who wants to commit? We're looking at those types of people. So we'll continue. And of course, I would say if HR was over here, they would say that I think what we had said was those who are shortlisted would be approached. And if you haven't been approached, that usually means the shortlisting would not have happened. But it's still an ongoing process. And we'll continue to recruit as it goes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Now, taking another step away from this line of thinking, let me ask, I guess, what some might consider a critical question, right? Sure. Let's say I'm an investor, and I'm a foreign investor. Of course, the vision of GMC about developing Bhutan, about the necessary reforms in Bhutan, all of that is very inspiring to Bhutanese and to foreigners who already love Bhutan, right? But if you are pitching to, let's say, a foreign investor, right? Why is GMC a good investment?
I would flip that and say, why does GMC want your investment? GMC is going to be it's a values-based city. Mm-hmm. And the type of investors, the type of partners, the type of residents in the GMC must be aligned to the value systems that we hold very deeply. Bhutanese value systems, the ethos that we have with gross national happiness values. And so you'll be surprised at how many investors there are around the world, how many institutional individuals there are who are very aligned with what we're doing with the GMC, what Bhutan has championed for so long through GNH. And we actually talked to so many investors. We've talked to so many investors over the last year and a half who are primarily completely taken by wanting to be part of the GMC. So there's that initial assessment of other values aligned. Then we go into technicals, right? And then, like I said, at a more technical level, we have our teams. We have the legal team, the taxation team. We have teams who will explain what the taxation system at the GMC would look like, and one that is extremely competitive, for example. We'll talk about how we could be a gateway to larger South Asia, because the market in Bhutan, of course, might be too small for some of them. We want them to be able to enter the larger South Asian region, for example. And I talked about this land economic corridor and how well we are placed. Those are all advantages. But also stability, also trust. And I think that is something that in a world that is seeing an erosion of trust on leadership across all levels, we have that in abundance in Bhutan, trust. And when people come to Bhutan, they realize with His Majesty the King at the leadership level, that they can trust us, that we're reliable people, that we're hardworking, and that what we say, we mean, and it'll be there consistently for the long term. So policy consistency is also very critical. Then we mentioned green and clean and safe and all of that, and those are also very powerful areas for being able to bring in investors. And that's what we're doing. We are talking to multiple investors in all these different economic clusters that I spoke about. We're in different areas of discussions and negotiations with them. And many of them are very interested. And we're talking about high level, we're talking about small. I also want to make sure that our Bhutanese audience understands that we also want Bhutanese to invest. Bhutanese must invest. And so please share your proposals. Just in the last 2 days or 3 days, I've been talking to different institutions, like YDF, for example, in private sector, people who are saying, we want to be part of the GMC. They're giving us expression of interest, proposals. And that is something that brings me such joy, because we need also Bhutanese to also start investing in the GMC. So we have all of those opportunities.
Yes, thank you. Before we get to the close of our session, one philosophical question that I wanted to ask, because I always enjoy talking to you about philosophy as well. In terms of, because you mentioned GNH, right? The GNH values informing what sort of city GMC will be.
Yes.
How is GNH in the DNA of GMC? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I noticed that in one of your previous answers, you said GMC will be clean, green, safe, and happy.
Yes, of course.
Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Well, you mentioned DNA. What I would say is that, and what I've been saying for a while, is that it makes sense for a country of cross-national happiness to give birth to a city of mindfulness. And what I mean by that is, like a mother and a child, the DNA remains the same, the value systems remain the same, the ethos, the identity remains the same. But the approach can be different, the personality can be different. And so GNH runs through the veins of GMC. People must be thinking sometimes, Bhutan building this economic hub, financial city, are they not moving away from GNH, Silamela? We're moving through GNH, not away from it. We're taking the core values of GNH into GMC. In fact, even in the very design, in terms of the architectural design, we embed GNH values in the policies that we shape, in the regulatory frameworks that we have, in all of the different elements of the GMC. GNH is at the root. So there is no way that we go away from that. Of course not. It is our development philosophy. Practically, what it also means is that when we look at the 4 pillars of GNH, I think Bhutan has done an extremely great job in the culture aspect and the environment and the good governance. And now where GMC is coming in is somewhat of a recalibration on the 4th pillar, on the sustainable economic growth. And so actually we are implementing GNH even more. We're looking at something such as mindful capitalism. We're not saying capitalism is bad. We're saying how we achieve the goals of capitalism. Bhutan can, and has always been looking at this holistic, balanced approach to it. And GMC is again this implementation, this actualization, this operationalization of the GNH values, vision, into a concrete model. So that's how at least I see GNH factoring into the GMC.
Thank you. Another question I think that the audience might have, that I have had for a while, is in terms of local leadership, not top leadership, but in terms of local leadership, will there be elected local leaders? Can maybe at some point, can I become the GUP of the Temple Dam?
You'd be a good GUP. So please continue that thought, whether in GMC or as a Thimphu boy here in Thimphu. But I think it's a bit too early, I think, to talk about the governance structure of the GMC as it matures. Right now, we're very comfortable with the structure that we have. I think the system that we've designed right now is one that allows us to be very agile, decisive, and able to kind of pivot, as I said, iterate as we need to. And so while as we mature and when the system demands it, we can talk about those elements. I think right now we've kind of quite wisely identified the structure that is well designed for this phase of the GMC's growth. And so eventually that might be the case. But you talked about leadership, I think it's also important to mention Bhutanese leadership, of course, in the form of His Majesty and the governor that we have, our former Prime Minister in Gelephu, working very hard at the Gelephu GMC level. But also the CEO that we have, Mr. Mun Leong, who is our CEO, brings in a vast level of experience, expertise, and insight. This is a man who kind of built Changi Airport. These are the hands that built Singapore in many ways. They say he's 79 years old, he's a bit old, okay. He has more energy than me, I think. He has the energy of a 29-year-old, I see sometimes. He was there in the airport gate commencement construction. He was there with the sickle working. So the energy is there. But more importantly, the insights are there, the experience is there. He's someone who was the engineer building Changi Airport in the early days. He's someone who then became the CEO, the chairman of Changi International Airport. He's then someone who went and ran Capitaland's investment company, real estate investment firm. He's held executive leadership, senior government leadership positions in Singapore for over 30 years. So there's someone who knows what he's doing, who's done it before in Singapore, both at the infrastructure development and also at the investment level. These are two areas that GMC needs to focus on right now as well. So we have people like him, and his whole kind of focus is also on capacity building, manpower development. He's always telling me, Rabsel, I just had a meeting with him 3 days ago. I sat down with him for about 2 hours. He said, Rabsel, it's not enough for you to be chief of comms. Think about how you have value added, he said. Think about how you can help all the different other verticals. You must provide value added in other areas, Sunil. And so these types of insights, people who can be mentors to me for the way I see it, these are the people who will be able to shape the next generation of local leaders or Bhutanese leaders in the GMC, but also in Bhutan. And I think there's a very important kind of mention of why we work with so many international experts. There's over 150 of them, I would say, who are working for GMC in all these different areas. But they work very closely with the Bhutanese team. Some are young, some are older. You can see I'm positioning myself in the slightly younger category. But the idea is that there's capacity building, there's knowledge transfer, there's institutional memory, so that in the longer term, Bhutan and GMC will have a set of Bhutanese leaders who can also now, it's not about the competency as I said, it's now they have that exposure, they have that experience, they have that leadership now. And so there's a very beautiful framework that we have that allows us to work with non-Bhutanese and with Bhutanese together. That's how the GMC is structured.
Thank you. Now that we're coming towards the end of the session, I want to close with a very simple question. In the past 2.5 years, 3 years that you've been in this team, can you tell us one anecdote or one story that you think exemplifies your overall experience with GMC, or that really moved you?
I'll do better. I'll give you two. I'll give you 2 examples. One, I think, speaks to the larger vision of the GMC and His Majesty, and 2 slightly more poignant moment that I had more recently. The first one is about less than a year ago. We had a bunch of very rich, successful businessmen who came to Bhutan. They were very interested in GMC. And these are very shrewd and smart business investors. And I met them for dinner one night. And I presented GMC, the whole slides, the GMC presentation. And they were very polite, they nodded, they were very kind. And they said, Rabsel, all this is great. What's your end goal? What's your end goal? What are you trying to do? What's the end goal of GMC? And I went back to my usual shtick, economic hub and connectivity, and I talked about the financial city, etc. And they were very polite. They nodded again and they said, thank you very much. And we had a nice dinner, and that was it. And then I hosted them for dinner again the next day, actually. Again, I met them for dinner just 24 hours later, and they came, Rabsel, how can we be part of the GMC? How can we contribute? What is the way to go about? And I looked at them and I said, but "Sir, didn't we just meet 24 hours ago?" And you were a bit, skeptical at that time. I said, "What happened in those 24 hours?" They said, "Well, this morning we had an audience with your king, Sehelobela." And they said, His Majesty was also talking about GMC. And they said that they asked him the same question. They said, "Your Majesty, what is the end goal of the GMC?" And they told me His Majesty looked at them and very calmly said, "I just want my people to be resilient." And I think that was such a powerful statement because it's a reflection of a founder, a visionary, who's thinking leaps and bounds long into the future. And having a people and a society that is resilient means one that is adaptable to any problems, one that can fix any issues or challenges that we may face. So His Majesty's vision is much longer term, and therefore the GMC is a tool, is a means to that larger end. And these investors understood that, and they understood that His Majesty had that vision, that long-term vision, and they understood that he had the capability to make it happen as well. And so for me, I see the GMC again as this means to the larger end, this tool to help shape Bhutan's larger vision. We're not just trying to build a city. It's not just an infrastructure development project. It's about transforming the country and the culture of being a more resilient place, moving away from a culture of entitlement, more work ethic, dignity of labor, entrepreneurial approach. So that's the first story that to this day resonates with me. The second one is 2 days ago in Gelephu. It was so powerful to see His Majesty, Her Majesty, the Gelses, picking up stones, shabto, providing manual labor throughout the day to help construct the Gelephu airport. And it's so symbolic because there again, we're not just building the airport, which is actually very important. It is the catalytic, foundational, transformative infrastructure for the GMC and for Bhutan. But seeing our royal family, seeing the king himself with the Gelses, with Her Majesty, actually being there with the people on the ground with our Desups and our Gelsups and our Prime Minister, Governor, CEO, all the senior government officials and GMC officials and the army. Seeing them actually work together. That for me was symbolic of why GMC will succeed, because we're all in this together. It is that bond, it is that fidelity, it is that loyalty that we have. GMC is that emanation of that trust between the king and the people. And when you have that unshakable spirit and that unshakable bond, that tadamsi, that service into the tawasum, that culture of service, when we have that, as small as we may be, I think that is something that is so unique that those are the ingredients for why the GMC will succeed. I'm 100% confident of that. And for me, just even during the hot day and running around, seeing that, I think, made me quite emotional, and it gave me that confidence that we're going to make this happen.
Yes. Thank you. Now, you talked about building resilience, but then you drop a poignant story like that, and I'm having a difficult time finding the resilience to even finish this section now. But that was Mr. Rabsel Dorji, who is the Chief of Communications at the Gelephu Mindfulness City, talking to us about his experience working there, talking about the vision itself. And this was brought to you by the Bhutan Global Mindfulness and MICE. So luckily I managed to get through that. Now, some couple of housekeeping notes as we end. There will be a QR code right about now. And you can use this QR code to give us your feedback about Bhutan Global Mindfulness and MICE's events, one of which happened right now. You can feel free to give them your honest opinion about what you thought about the overall event, but when it comes to me, don't feel like you have to be honest. You can lie to make me happy.
I'll do that.
Thank you. So that's the QR code that you scan in order to give your feedback. And there is another set of QR codes. There will be some more QR codes coming your way on the screen. Those are the QR codes you scan if you want to participate in more events like this by following them on their social media.
If I may add,
Of course.
I also want to use this opportunity to, of course, thank BGMM, but also if you want to connect with GMC, please feel free to do that. You can write to me directly, rabsel@gmc.bt. My job is to take in any questions, feedbacks, criticisms, constructive criticisms as much as possible. So it doesn't mean that the conversation ends over here. For me, I see this just as the start. In fact, I want to really double down on domestic engagement, going across the country, talking to every Bhutanese, every stakeholder as much as possible. I know people must be thinking, it's been a while now, information has been a bit sparse. People must be thinking in the vacuum of information, that's where, of course, speculation and rumors happen. And we know that. We've been very careful about how we approach the information and how much we can share. But now we're ready. Now we want to go and talk to as many Bhutanese. So also please feel free to use, I want to use this platform to connect with our Bhutanese near and far. So just contact us and we're more than happy to engage. In fact, tomorrow, for example, I have a session with the Bhutanese diaspora. We do this every quarter. It's facilitated by the Chamber of Commerce, the Bhutanese Chamber of Commerce in Perth. And we'll talk to as many Bhutanese diaspora. And we've talked to RTC over here. We'll talk to as many stakeholders and we'll continue to do that. So my final message would be, I hope to see all of you soon in one of these events again. Thank you. Thank you, Pooh.
Thank you so much. That is Rabsel@gmc.bt. And when you write to him, remind him also to find a better football club to support. Thank you so much from the host and all of us in the organizing team. Thank you.